Hello and welcome to the very first voiceover session of Daybreak Horsemanship. The lovely little lady you see in the video is me, Jess, and the cute mare I'm working with is named Kenna. Kenna is for sale for those of you that are interested, and she is broke to ride. The owner gave me permission to post these videos up on my channel as well. Kenna became a part of my training program because her owner is a soon-to-be mom and can't put the time into her that she needs right now. So the main focus of her training has been resolving some trust issues that have cropped up in a dangerous way in the past. Kenna does not trust any farrier or vet enough to let them get close, and when she feels trapped, she tends to defend herself in any way she feels necessary. And this can include biting, striking, rearing, or swinging her hind end into you. The type of training that I do is psychology-based, rather than force or mechanical means-based, so knowing that this behavior stems from fear gives me a good base to go off of. And while it would be really dramatic and attention-grabbing in a YouTube video for her to be striking, rearing, and giving the coined crazy behaviors during this segment, that wouldn't be best for the horse or for the goals that the owner and I are trying to achieve. When I work with horses, I think of it as retraining the pathways in the brain so that a new behavior is rooted more strongly than the old one. So one of the goals when working with this mare is to never allow the session to escalate to that level. Because the more that she practices the dangerous behaviors, the more solidified they become and the quicker they would arise. But at the same time, in order to show her a new way to handle her fear, I still have to bring the fear response up, but only bring it up enough to challenge her to think about it. Going about that can be done in many different ways. For instance, in this session, I'm working with a plastic tarp. If you look clearly, you can see her flinching every time I flap it. This is the absolute maximum level that I would want to challenge her at. I have to be very aware about what she is doing and be ready if she tries to defend herself at this level. If you were to read her body language, you can see how high she is holding her head, how tensely she is holding her muscles, and if you were close, you would see she isn't really blinking or breathing normally. These are all signs that show that we are at the edge point where if I were to go any farther, she would probably cross the threshold into showing those aggressive behaviors. So why would I be addressing the problem with a tarp instead of bringing out needles or immediately trying to pick up her feet? And that question is answered by bringing it back to the fact that this is a fear-based issue. The behaviors she has around the farriers and the veterinarians are just a symptom of the problem, which is that she doesn't understand how to process fear itself in a healthy way. The session that I am filming was one of our first sessions as well, so immediately jumping into working on her behavior with her feet or with vet care type scenarios would not set us up for success in the long run. So we are working with an easier scenario to bring up her fear response before moving into the type of situations where she has previously already decided that she had to defend herself in. And now that we have gone through all of that, we can take a look at what is actually going on in the video. You'll notice that I am keeping the rope pretty slack while working with her, and this is to allow her the opportunity to move away if she feels the situation is too much pressure. Kenna's aggressive behaviors only come up when she feels she is unable to escape, so it is really important to take that trigger away in every way possible, and in some scenarios even help her move her feet if she becomes so afraid that she freezes. One of my goals in this particular session as well was to be as clear as I could about communicating that I wasn't asking Kenna to do anything. I do this by keeping myself from staring at her, keeping my belly button pointed away from her or in a neutral position, and trying to keep my body language relaxed. My job was to hold the rope, do my best to gauge when she was ready for the next step, and to be mindful of my own safety. So if you'll notice, a few moments earlier, she did come into my space a little too close for comfort. There was a moment where I had to make a judgment call. Do I correct the behavior as though it were dominant, or do I just get out of the way? In that particular moment, I made the call to move out of the way and backed up a step so she would have a wider alleyway to escape through next time rather than just through me. And then I continued on with the tarp, and you can see that for most of it, the entire time her ears have been back and her expression has been worried. Her little movements of her head going down and back up are her attempt to regulate her emotions. And you can also see that she has been moving around quite a lot, but has started to look at me flapping the tarp more and more. Because she had chosen to move around, I kept my feet still so she could choose the distance and the zones of her body she wanted to point the tarp at. The reason that I have the rope at all is for safety. If she were to try to strike at me or kick at me, I would have a lot better chance of defending my space at this stage with a rope. You will also notice that I have not really quit flapping the tarp at any point. This is because I want Kenna to learn to self-regulate her fear. Because of this very specific training issue, if I were to stop flapping the tarp at certain points while she was still tense, Kenna would learn to make certain movements just to get me to stop flapping the tarp because she was uncomfortable. But that wouldn't help her learn how to accept the tarp as simply part of her environment, no different than the trees blowing in the wind or the rain falling against her back. When she gives a big mental release, then I will stop flapping the tarp with the intention of allowing her to process the situation better. So while working with the tarp, I'm constantly gauging when Kenna gives me certain release in an area. You'll notice when she started to become more confident with the tarp flapping around her shoulder area on one side, I then moved to the other side and began flapping it around other areas. This brought up the tension we had seen earlier, so I picked a safe distance away near her hindquarters, kept flapping, and waited for her to release her tension. She did choose to move her hindquarters away. I didn't chase her. I allowed her to process it in the way that she felt she needed to, which then again was also moving away. And then she moved into my space a little bit, and she pricked her ears, so I dropped the tarp and let her process. You can see that her ears are perked forward and she's asking me a little bit of a question. She's curious about what's going on. Well, I call that expression when they perk their ears like that a question. It's usually a curious reaction. It's something that I like to see, is something that tells me that I'm usually on the right track. So you can see here that she is starting to flick her ears a little bit more. She does have a softer body expression. She's not quite so hard. And right there, her head is level with her withers, and I really like that. And when she's moving, her movements aren't quite as frantic. They're not quite as defensive. They're not quite as harsh. So there she moved and told me that she was a little bit more uncomfortable. So I went ahead and took the initiative and then stepped away from her even more to allow her more room. Yeah, she's already making some really great progress here from the start of the video, and we're not even 10 minutes in. Really proud of this little mare. And so here I'm flapping and I'm flapping and I'm waiting for her to give me a bigger soften so I can come in closer. And there, while she did kind of move her feet and show that she was uncomfortable, when she came back, she looked at me and she really seemed to soften. So I brought the tarp closer and it didn't bring up a giant amount of tension. So started to kind of gauge on how much I could kind of bring the energy up, so to speak. And yes, your arm really, really does get tired when you're doing this, but this is so important in your horse's fundamental training. It's also important to note that this strategy and the way that I work with this horse is not going to work with all horses that have aggression issues. Each situation is different. By posting this, I am not trying to instruct as per se for people to go out with their aggressive horses and go and do this exact training method. You should really have a trainer on your side to gauge what that horse is doing, because it really is a moment to moment basis, and you have to communicate and you have to know what your horse is telling you in order to do this correctly. And not to mention, stay safe. So there is a bit of a huge breakthrough. You can see that the tarp is actually a lot closer to her hind end on this side over here. And yes, she moves her hind end away, but she's still soft. She's still walking away in a softer manner. She's really, really starting to release and relax. But it's also important to note that while she's beginning to relax, she's not quite there yet. You can see there that right now she has a little bit more of that tense, worried expression, and just a moment ago she pawed. This is very emotionally and mentally strenuous for her. It is very, very difficult to face your own demons, and I do believe that in this particular case, Kenna is facing hers. She's learning that she doesn't necessarily have to defend herself all the time. When she's afraid, she's not going to have to defend herself or default to striking or biting at the humans, that they can actually be a source of something else besides fear. So while she moves past that, my job is just to be there and just try to gauge where she needs me to be while not getting in the way of that process. You'll notice that it's interesting that the more that Kenna gives release, the more she seems to paw in frustration. I believe that this new way of thinking for her is actually quite difficult for her to switch over to, which is why she paws and which is why she gets frustrated with it. Kenna is not a mean mare. While she has learned some tendencies that were unnecessary, it was the humans in her life that caused them. And I believe we can absolutely help other horses like her. I can't wait to see what kind of horse Kenna reveals herself to be once her constant fear is no longer an issue. Again, interesting. She pawed and then she started to circle around again, and then she stopped right at the same place that she had stopped before. And then she chose to come to me, but it wasn't a barging into my space type of come. It was a pretty respectful little bring-in. Oops, hate it when I drop the tarp. And there is that really nice... Oh, and she just got spooked by something behind her. that really nice big release that we have worked so hard for in this session. You can see the tension in her body has just started to really melt away. And that is where our little session ends. And then before I go up and interrupt her thoughts by taking off her halter, I just stand there for a few seconds and let her process without interruption. Doing some more processing there. She's kind of pawing and is sniffing at the ground, which all these little things do tend to mean more than what the average person thinks of them. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I know it's been a bit of a long haul of a video, but thanks for hanging in there. See you next time.